people were doing compressions and we were not clear about what our priorities at the time were. There were times where we had so many pauses. So what was the biggest source of pauses? Stack shocks.
We have to get the airway in. Oh, yeah, those
it's the stack shocks. No, definitely airway's a problem. But the stack shocks were killing people, right?
Yes.
Because
oh, my gosh.
Think about this. When we did stack shocks, we had 3 shocks, one after another, right? The total duration of time of pause, if you were really good at this, was almost 37 seconds, 40 seconds. 40 seconds.
With no perfusion going north to the brain. Hey there, I'm your host, Sarah Lorenzini, a rapid response nurse and educator who loves telling stories to teach critical thinking. This podcast is for nurses who want the knowledge, skills, and confidence to respond to any emergency. With almost 20 years of experience in the ER and critical care nursing, and a master's degree in nursing education, I have a lot of stories to share, and I love to nerd out and break down the pathophysiology, pharmacology, and nurses' role in emergencies. Stories bring learning to life. It is way easier to learn from and remember the stories that my colleagues and mentors have told me than anything I've read in a textbook. And that is why I made this podcast. Every episode is packed full of exactly what you need to know to handle whatever crisis that could arise on your shift. It's one thing to get the right answer on the test, but knowing how to detect when your patient is declining and what to do when your patient is crashing is what will make or break your day and might just save your patient's life. Welcome back to the podcast. Today's guest is someone I've been looking forward to speaking with so much, Dr. Ashish Panchal. He's the professor of emergency medicine at The Ohio State University and the chair of Emergency Cardiovascular Care at the American Heart Association. He's a prolific researcher in pre-hospital care and the host of the In the Heart of Care podcast, which is a show that highlights the power of preparation and continuous training in saving lives. So in this episode, we're diving deep into how resuscitation guidelines have evolved, what we used to do, what we do now, and why evidence-based practice is crucial. From stack shocks for ventricular arrhythmias to atropine for asystole in the year 2000, to hypothermia and targeted temperature management in the mid-2000s, and the shift to focusing on high-performance CPR and early defibrillation today. We're going to dissect one cardiac arrest case through 3 eras of medicine and see what it teaches us about saving lives, improving outcomes, and never settling for status quo. But before we dive into this case, I want you to meet my guest, Dr. Panchal. Welcome to the Rapid Response RN podcast.
Hey, it's my pleasure to be here, and please call me Ash.
Okay, Ash, I can do that. Can you give the listener just a brief history of your work with the AHA and just resuscitation science in general?
Yeah, definitely. So I have actually I'm going to be honest, I feel like I'm an unbelievably blessed individual because I walked into resuscitation science with a cadre of people who are the most amazing mentors in the world. I got into resuscitation science in 2008. I did my MD, I did my PhD first, my MD, went to residency, did all that kind of stuff. And then I moved to University of Arizona. I was recruited out there to become a resuscitationist. And the people who were there, and at that time, it was the time of hands-only CPR. We were trying to figure out if this works, and it was the hotbed. So I went there because I'm like, wait, you guys are changing the world. You're shaking the ground. I want to be involved in this. Carl Kern was there, Gordon Evie, Ben Bobrow, Dan Spate, like all of these people who are giants in resuscitation, and they were my mentors. And that's where I started, and they got me involved in the American Heart Association early on. So I was involved pretty much from 2010 on with the American Heart Association in different parts, right? I was on the resuscitation research group, and then I was part of the science subcommittee. I became vice chair and chair of the science subcommittee and guideline processes. So I've written a bunch of guidelines. And now I'm the chair of ECC. Now, probably the biggest thing that along the way that I'm probably the most proud of is the 2020 adult guidelines. I was the first author of that and ran that whole chapter. And it was definitely painful, but definitely a product of love when all is said and done. But that sweat equity really means a lot to me in that.
Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine how much literature you had to parse through and dissect to determine what
what are the new guidelines going to be? I remember when they came out and we're like, okay, finally, like, let's change things up. Let's be better for our patients. So I'm curious, like, on these committees, like, what's actually going on? Like, how do these new guidelines come to be? Like, what are you guys doing behind the scenes that's making this happen?
Well, I love looking behind the veil at anything like this because it's like you don't understand the pain and the suffering because you see the product, right? And the product is also beautifully produced, right? It's like perfect. With the guidelines, the process itself starts years and years in advance, right? And so we are already in the background starting to do analyses. And actually analyses for even 2030 are starting now. The real science is starting now, right? And so for the 2020 guidelines, just to give you an idea of the comprehensive 2020 guidelines, the first step was really recruiting these experts, right? And so you're going through all walks and really vetting people and identifying who are these people who can help you change the world. It's going to be not only the primary resuscitationist researchers, it's also the people who have worked in guidelines, who have worked in implementation science to really make this happen. The people who are going to push and understand and argue about what the data looks like. So then what happens is these individuals get together and we start having our meetings where we start divvying up different topics and we start doing the searches ourselves. We're lucky, though, because the searches that the AHA does are in conjunction with the International Liaison Consortium of Resuscitation. The AHA is part of this group. It's an international group with people from everywhere, Singapore, Denmark, Africa, everywhere. And we all argue about resuscitation, right? We all sit around and really go through the data and piece out what's right, what's wrong, what could, on the international level, what does the data really say? And then what the AHA does, takes that data and data from searches that are done by the AHA experts who are part of these writing groups and puts it all together for our population. Because let's be honest, what we do in the United States is probably really different than what's happening in France. It just is, right? And so that interpretation is happening by the guideline resuscitation researchers. And so then they're going through each of these different concepts, and we're literally arguing, right? So sometimes you'll hear on social media one person arguing about, hey, we should do it this way or something like that. This is 12 to 14 people arguing about all the data evaluated by ILCOR, by everyone around the nation, and we throw it on the table and it's a drag out. It's a true drag. I mean, it is so much fun because it's respectful, but we have to be honest because one of the things I don't want us to lose is the people who are in this room are you and I. It's the people who are just so dedicated to resuscitation that every life matters. They are the frontline people who are doing the resuscitations and at the same time want to fight to make sure that we save every single life. So I hope that gives you like that 20,000 foot view because for me, it ended up being they're my friends. These are the people I am so connected to because of the fights, the arguments, and we remember those moments, and that's the cool part.
Yeah. And I imagine when you're recruiting these people, you're looking for people not just with, a lot of accolades in their experience, but also a certain personality type that's not the one that's like, well, back in my day, well, we've always done it this way, or here's whenever I tried this, but people who genuinely want to know what's best so they can do what's best and set their ego aside. They're willing to be open to new interpretations of the science. I'm assuming there's a personality type that you're looking for as well.
Yeah. You table this is what I used to do, or the anecdote. Like, it was funny because like I was in one meeting where we're having these arguments and somebody says, well, wait a second, this is how I do it. And then everyone said, stop. We have a word for this. We're going to call it pineapple. So every single time you say this, we're going to say pineapple if you get an anecdote because when all is said and done is if we're talking about an anecdote, we may not be saving a life.
Right.
We absolutely do not know.
Right.
So I think you got to choose those individuals who want to argue, who want to really pull the data and ask the question to each other, hey, I love your idea. I respect what you're thinking. Can you tell me what supports your point of view? And you better be able to stand up and say, hey, here's the data that I know about, which says this, and expect someone to come back at you. And that educational argument is on a completely different level than talking about anecdotes.
Oh, man. I personally really enjoy and just savor those professional types of interactions, the banter back and forth. I really do enjoy it. And so I wish I could just be a fly on the wall in this room watching what you guys are coming up with. So thank you for giving us like a behind the veil view into what's happening as we develop these guidelines. So I'm curious, so now how does your work with the AHA and pre-hospital education and RQI, like how do those all intersect in your personal, professional roles?
My journey is I want to be a resuscitationist. I want to be the best person that I can be when it comes to thinking about these concepts, right? And so the work I've done with the AHA is really focusing on that larger multiplier, right? So in my community, I'm an EMS doc. I'm a medical director for a county agency. We cover 300 square miles. My teams, my gosh, these people are amazing individuals. They dedicate their lives, literally their lives, their families support us, and they're on the front lines doing the good deed. And not only that, they're continually being the best resuscitation they can be. It starts there, right?
Yeah.
And from there, I think we take those lessons we learn and start stepping up, right? And we talk about the multiplier effect. Like, how can I expand the people I'm saving? With the guidelines, I can affect 15 million people. Like, that's the number of people who get trained, right? And so how many lives can we help save per year, right? We know we have 350 to 400,000 arrests a year. If we can help one person do better compressions or even think for 5 seconds that, hey, if I push a little deeper, I might save this person, that becomes like the core concept. Now, RQI and what's happened through that process is really an expansion of my research work, because my research work has always been looking at depth, rate, looking at BLS care and understanding how we can expand and become high-performance resuscitationists, right? And for me, the transition was, hey, can we start talking about platforms which can intervene early on, train people up like I'm doing already at my agency, and do it in a format that supports care. And so we started doing research on low-dose, high-frequency training early on. And one of our papers that we did at Ohio State was on one of our nursing units. We took 2 floors of our nursing units and did high-frequency training. And we really basically got everyone all trained up through RQI, and we started seeing changes in outcomes on how we performed on patients. I'm like, wait a second, really? This is happening? And so we then implemented it at Ohio State, and so we have it across our medical center. At last check, over the last 3 to 5 years, we've had 32 million practice compressions that I can track in our data set.
Whoa.
Because of RQI practice. Now, that is getting ready and assuring competence to save lives. And that's what we should do in every hospital system.
I agree. That's awesome. Okay. So I love hearing your background, what has led you to this point. What I wanted to do today is kind of shift to a case study, because I love teaching with case studies.
I love it.
So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to tell you a pretty common case, one that we probably experienced personally. And then I want us to go through and respond to what we would have been doing to care for this patient and how that has shifted over the last 25 years. Okay, so Ash, here's your patient. A 56-year-old man collapses while jogging in a local park. Bystanders initiate CPR. EMS arrives in 4 minutes. Initial rhythm, ventricular fibrillation. So he's defibrillated. They achieve ROSC in the field. He's transported to a local hospital with ongoing post-arrest care. All right, so tell me, if you were an emergency healthcare provider who responded to this patient early in the year 2000, so before the 2000 AHA guidelines came out, with the knowledge that we had, say, in January 2000,
Sure.
What would have been your care priorities for this patient?
Okay. I love this. This is fun. Okay, so I'm going to give a caveat.
It's like a history lesson.
Yeah, no, I'm going to start out with the caveat that, number one, glory be that this guy got bystander CPR in 2000, and EMS responded in 4 minutes. Wow.
Okay, true.
No, I love it, because like those are kind of the times that I'm seeing these days, right? And of course, let's be honest, in 2000, bystander CPR was a totally different bird, right? And so if we take that 2000 time period, we knew at that time it was ABCs, right? It was definitely our ABCs. And I still remember my slide deck from this. I had the cubes A, B, and C. And of course, in 2010, I switched it around. It was like one of my favorite slides I've ever done. But I think at that time, it was thinking about compressions, but it was variable. It was people were doing compressions and we were not clear about what our priorities at the time were. And with that in mind, there were times where we had so many pauses. Okay, so what was the biggest source of pauses? Stack shocks.
Get the airway in. Oh yeah, those
Oh no, it's
shocks.
the stack shocks. No, definitely airway's a problem, but the stack shocks were killing people, right?
Yes.
Because
oh my gosh.
think about this. When we did stack shocks, we had 3 shocks, one after another, right? The total duration of time of pause, if you were really good at this, was almost 37 seconds, 40 seconds.
With no perfusion going north to the brain during that time.
Yeah. So your CPP, and we all remember Peter Kudenchuk's figure right now, where you have CPP raising, you pause, it drops out. So for every patient, it dropped out every single time. And so you can imagine survival was hit by that.
Yeah.
Definitely airway. For sure, we were tubing every single person.
Yeah. ABC, right? Get that airway in as soon as possible. Please pause compressions. I have to see the airway.
And I honestly don't know how many people we goosed. I honestly don't know. But then what else did we do? We did epinephrine. We gave epinephrine. We gave tons of epinephrine because we're coming off the time where we were doing high-dose epinephrine. Remember that?
Yep.
And we discovered that, hey, if I do high-dose epinephrine, what does it do? It kills people, right? I can give high-dose epinephrine to a rock, and the rock will start moving. It does not mean that it saves a life.
Yeah.
Right? So it's that balance. We gave tons of bicarb. And I think we know better now. And my gosh, we knew nothing about post-arrest care. We had no clue. We just brought him to the hospital and just...
We're like, Ross, yay!
Yeah, let's hope for the best. Yeah, I mean, it's a different time. It was the Wild West. It really was.
So real quick, I wanted to pause. I just realized some of my listeners probably have no idea what I'm talking about whenever we say stack shocks. They've never seen that in practice. So we just describe it really quick. Okay, so we pause compressions. We look on the monitor. We see a shockable rhythm. Okay, charge. Everyone clear. Shock delivered. Look at the monitor again. Again, all the while, no compressions are happening. Look at the monitor again. Oh, darn it. Still shockable rhythm. Okay. Charge. Everyone clear. Shock delivered. Okay, look at the monitor again. Darn
One
it,
more
we
time.
still don't have it. Okay, and again. Okay, everyone clear. Doop. Shock delivered. Rhythm on the monitor. Darn it. Okay, well, we did our 3 shocks. Back on the chest for compressions. And this whole time, we are not doing compressions. We would shock and then look for result. Darn it. Shock, look for result. We wasted so much time. But that's what we knew, right?
Yeah.
That was the standard of care. I remember doing that and not thinking a thing of it. I had never even heard of like chest compression fraction. Like that wasn't even like
we didn't know any of
an
that.
acronym back in the day.
Well, and the thing is, we had an idea. There was a reason for it, right? Because what we had learned is that your impedance, your thoracic impedance, that energy that you need to save the life actually decreased as you gave more shocks. Now, here's the crazy part. It was a forest from the trees concept, right? Because at the time, that's what we knew. We didn't know about how much cerebral perfusion pressure had an impact. We didn't know that, hey, we need to be on the chest. And the other big thing is we didn't know the advances that we would get with biphasic shocks. I mean, come on. Biphasic shock, first shock success for VFVT, 90%. So once our technology got there, we're opening up a whole new door of how we can save people's lives.
Yep. I remember the first defibrillator I got to use was like, I don't know, maybe I'm using my hands, but it's like this big. What is that? Like,
yeah, no.
2 feet by 3 feet? Like
bigger than a bread box. Way bigger than a bread box.
It was huge. And then you had like the big paddles on it, and it went to 360 joules. Yeah, it was just monophasic. And then when we got our new defibrillators that were biphasic, everyone's like, ooh, fancy, and shocks you from 2 different directions. Like, ooh, science, technology. This is so exciting. Okay, yes, so thank you for taking us that little trip down memory lane here. Let's fast forward 10 years. All right, so now it's 2010. And now there's new research coming out around like advanced airways and cardiac arrest, as well as emerging evidence on targeted temperature management. So if it's 2010, this same patient, how might we approach them a little bit differently?
Well, let's start at the top. I mean, definitely we went to single shock at that point.
Okay, woof, thank goodness.
Yeah, I know. But even before that, one of the biggest things that happened at that time period was the call to action for compressions in our population, right? So Michael Sayer at the time wrote a position statement for the AHA. And for those of you who know Michael, he is the medical director for Medic One, has done tons of research on this area. He's one of my mentors when I was actually a resident, huge inspiration. And the call to action was, hey, hands-only CPR, do CPR, let's start saving some lives, right? All of us get trained, and it was a huge shift, right? It was monumental. Remember going back to my little slide deck where I talk about these are the fundamental blocks. Guess what? I'm going to top them over and change them up. That changed the dynamic because we finally started saying, hey, guys, one of the biggest barriers that we have for mom, dad, uncle, auntie, whoever you are to do your first compression is the airway. It's the airway. When I tell you to do airway first, I'm like, oh, they vomited. I'm out the door. I'm not doing anything, right? And that was the first big barrier, and we got through that barrier. From there, it became defibrillations. Okay, if we do a single shock, we have a biphasic defibrillator, we know we're going to get great success. That was a great start. We changed up meds, right? So now we're actually doing things like using antiarrhythmics, thinking that we're going to actually save some more lives by using antiarrhythmics. We'll break these shockable rhythms. And we started saying, okay, let's be a little more realistic about the data around some of the other meds. Atropine, bicarb. We need to start thinking and being a little more focused on how we go about using these medications. Like, let's be honest. If somebody has hyperkalemia and they have a cardiac arrest on their way to dialysis, we've got to do something about the potassium, right?
Right.
And that's reasonable, but every person didn't need it at that time.
Right.
Now, I think the other thing that I really wanted to highlight is really the concept of we're starting to think about saving the brain. We started making the priority that neurologically intact survival is the outcome variable that we want. And this is where you really start seeing the change in the evidence, right? So we weren't just looking for survival anymore when it came to all the large-scale trials and things like that. Now you're talking about CPC scores, cerebral performance scores, and better than that, modified Rankin scores, where you're really starting to understand, is this person who's coming here the same person that I knew an hour ago, right? And we're talking about saving the brain. We're talking about cooling, right? We're starting to have those discussions that we really need to do about what's the right thing to do to cool people down. And we started talking about therapeutic hypothermia and things like that, which was kind of an exciting time.
It was an exciting time. Everyone gets chilled saline. Everyone gets cold packs. Everyone's getting cold. As fast as you can get them cold, get them cold. The colder, the better.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, my goodness. I remember watching an episode of Dr. House.
Oh, gosh.
And they, this was a long time ago, and they instituted hypothermia protocol. This was like I don't know, maybe like 2005. I don't know. It's been a while.
Sure, yeah.
And they had dropped the patient temperature, and I was like, this is the most ridiculous sci-fi stuff. We do not do this in the hospital.
No.
And then I swear, like, very soon after, they're like, hey, there's this new research study out that says if you make the patient cold post-arrest, it saves the brain. I was like, wait, what? I just saw this on Dr. House, and I made fun of it. Okay, all right, this is the thing now. Let's do this thing. And so, yeah, all the research supported it. Let's drop the temperature as fast as we can. Pre-hospital got on board, and they were chilling the patients with cold saline. They had little fridges on the ambulance to drop the patient's temperature. Like, let's do this. Let's save those brains.
We were bought in. Yes.
We were bought in. Yes, yes.
And the thing is, it was an interesting time, right? Because there was 2 randomized control trials, good ones, right?
Yeah.
But there were small randomized control trials, which really showed us, hey, if we cool people, we could save more brains, save more lives. And it was a huge impact. And so at that point, we had something to hang our hats on. Now, small randomized control trials, which we reviewed in detail, saw the benefit and couldn't ignore it. Because let's be honest, at 2010, we were not saving lives like we are now, right? Survivors were not the thing at the time. And so we were trying to jump on whatever we could find, right? And it's the best evidence at the time. It was the best thing we could do. And man, it was a tough awakening a number of years later when in the pre-hospital space, we realized from a number of trials that as we gave all these liters of cold saline to someone who has post-cardiac arrest myocardial dysfunction, whose hearts are barely moving, and now we're filling them full of fluid, what did we end up doing? We may have hurt a lot of people, but it's not out of a bad intention. It was what we knew. We didn't know. It's like giving stack shocks. We didn't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even now, when we look back, that wasn't that long ago that we were really thinking of this. It really highlights how important being solid in that data is, right?
Yeah, and just to give some grace to the people that, including me,
that's me.
It was me, right?
Yeah.
Our heart was we want to save these brains.
Yes.
And the studies show that if we drop the temperature, it does save brains. Now we know there's more to it, right? There's safe ways to do that.
Nuance.
But we did ask the questions what's the best temperature? What are we actually shooting for? What is the ideal temperature? We knew cold was good. We knew cold was better than fever, right? We have proven that. But how cold should we make them? And how many liters of fluid is beneficial until it turns harmful? We started asking the questions, but we needed the research to support it. So I think that we were on to something, right? I think we did probably save more brains, but there's definitely some tweaking that needed to be done for sure.
But this is not the only example of it, right? So you probably remember Mona for ACS, right?
Oh, yeah. I remember learning at nursing school. I'm taking notes. MONA.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And around the same time, we also gave beta blockers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we gave metoprolol, low pressure. It was 5 milligrams 3 times.
3 doses,
right?
Yep.
We did that 3 times dose. We all did this, right? And what did we discover? The person who was on the Starling's curve, on the end of it, right, where their function was bad because their infarct size is so big, we gave them beta blockers and we killed them, right? They crumped on us. But it wasn't because we weren't right. Beta blockers do help. It's the timing. It's the manner. And it's how we do it. And the nuance that we have now about targeted temperature management and fever prevention is saving brains. It is saving lives. And it takes time for some of that data to build.
Yeah, exactly. Just another one to hit on. I remember bicarb being such a focus in resuscitation. And even after the guidelines came out, the team that I work with being I think we should still give the bicarb because the pH looks better after we give it. We can see it. We just gave the bicarb. Now the pH is better. We can see it. And so it actually took years.
Yeah.
In my experience, for the medical community to actually accept the idea that bicarb is not as amazing as we think it is.
Let's be frank. A lot of us still give bicarb, right?
Yeah, and there's a time and a place for it for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to break those habits. It's hard to break the instruction that you hear from someone you respected like nobody's business. Like your first medical director, your first medic team lead, your first nurse manager who's like, hey, this is what you should do. And you have it in your soul that this is the right thing to do because I can save some lives. But it's amazing how we're starting to get more information and we're learning all these little pieces. And it's as you start, unveiling and peeling back the onion, right, that we start finding all these different pieces.
Okay. All right. So let's fast forward again. We're going to fast forward to the present year.
Okay, I'm on there.
At the time of this recording, it is June of 2025. So I know we have some new updated guidelines coming out in October of this year, which I cannot wait to see what the new ones are. But based on our current guidelines, how should we approach this same patient? Arrested in the field, ventricular fibrillation upon arrival, shocked him, got ROSC. Okay, so what are we focusing on now?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that I think all of us can really put our teeth into, which was a huge change from 2020, is the very fact that we are all bought into a larger system of care where we are a team. And it starts from mom and dad, uncle, auntie, every single person in the home, in the family, for that stranger to start with bystander CPR. If you witness it, if somebody suddenly collapses, start CPR.
Quick pause. I've got a question for you. Have you ever walked away from a resuscitation thinking, that went pretty well, but how can we be even better next time? Well, I hope you've asked that because that's how we keep getting better and better as clinicians and as teams. Let me tell you about another great podcast that you need to check out. In the Heart of Care is produced by RQI Partners and hosted by Dr. Ashish Panchal. You may remember him from episode 140. He's an emergency physician and educator who really understands what it takes to lead when the pressure's on. This show takes you inside the real work of building readiness, what systems and strategies actually hold up during critical events, and how teams train, communicate, and grow from both wins and missteps. You'll hear honest stories from the front lines, lessons from sim labs, and practical tools that can help your team perform better when it matters the most. So whether you're at the bedside, running education, or leading a team, there's something in every episode for you. In the Heart of Care is available now, wherever you get your podcast. Give it a listen. Now, back to the episode.
Right? I have a program at Ohio State. It's my CPR internship program. They're undergrads, 25 of them, who go around throughout Columbus and teach every single person they can find how to do CPR. These guys are amazing. Like when you talk about people who have energy, undergrads, they have energy, right? They're out there teaching people how to do CPR, and that's the right thing to do, right? And we have our whole initiative for CPR in schools. We've changed the dynamic. We're looking at a generation of responders now. We're thinking about the future, right? And once that happens, and it gives us the protoplasm that when we come to the scene as EMS, and then when they come to the hospital for our nursing teams and our physician teams, we have the protoplasm there that we can save a life, right? Mm-hmm. There's enough CPP going on. We have enough good flow. Brains are maintained. So what now our defibrillation strategies of high-performance CPR up until the point that we do a short pause, shock, pre-charge, right?
Yeah.
And hover, and then get right back on it. Immediate, minimal interruptions. And the cool part is now we're adding layers, right? We're starting to say, hey, can I look at physiologic markers during a resuscitation? Can I look at ETCO2, for instance? And this is the new thing, right? Because we know there's an association. We don't know why. We know ETCO2 gives us an idea that there's these things are going well. In our shop, Michelle Nassel, one of my faculty, her whole research world is ETCO2. She's looking at waveforms now and like trying to figure all this stuff out. But we know it helps. It helps our resuscitations. We're doing epinephrine, right? We still do epi. And how did we get to the point of doing epi? We argued, we fought, we kicked and screamed. We did the randomized controlled trial, and we saw that lives were saved. Now, here's the big thing. And this was the argument in 2020. Aren't we killing more people by giving epinephrine? Well, wait. When we look at the randomized controlled trials and we put together all the data, who has the most impact from epinephrine, who got nothing else before it, are asystolic and PEA people. Their odds of survival increased. Before this, nothing would work, right? Yeah. We're bringing people back from the dead, right? It's amazing to see that it actually had an effect in that population. We didn't know this before. And so, yes, so some of that neurological devastation that we're always worried about is there. We have to think about that. But now we can start having the question about what do we do for survivability? We have advances on thinking about TTM, right? So now it's targeted temperature management. Now it's temperature control in the future, right? And we're starting to think about how aggressive we can be about hypothermia and be reasonable about it and get the people the strategies they need. And one of the biggest things, and I'll be honest with you, so much excitement around the concept of how we think about neuroprotective strategies and how we bring people and really identify those people who are survivable. And the thing is, we need to stop withdrawing in 24 hours. We need to stop looking at pupils. We need to stop and give people the time so that we can actually see if they're recoverable. Last concept. The last concept for me, which was, I'll be honest, one of the biggest changes in the 2020 guidelines, which I am just, it is still a moment in my career that will never change. And I will always remember it, is Kelly Sawyer, who wrote the statement on survivorship. And me and her sat down and we had a conversation about why isn't this part of the chain of survival? And her and I pushed it up the hill and it became a chain. Because why? Because we have survivors and they are real and they are powerful people and they are going to have great lives because of what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we had to make it part of the chain. And that is one of the things that I can walk away from our guideline process and say that we are highlighting the people who are changing the world and are still helping us change. They're advocates now, right? And that's an exciting part of this 2025 approach.
I was very excited about all the changes that came in 2020. I think that they've been, positive things. And I'm looking forward to see what 2025 has to tell us about how we can be even better for patients. I may have to have you back on the podcast.
Oh my God, I would love it. I would love it.
Really?
Yes, bring me back and I will talk about this till the end of the day.
I know mum's the word right now, but I really want.
Yeah, I am indeed embargoed. I've written a couple of chapters in this time around, so I'm always very careful.
Okay, yes. Obviously, don't break any rules.
Nope,
but
I'm
I
good.
really am super excited about hearing what they're doing now. I think for me, the biggest takeaway and the culture shift that I've seen is just the focus on high performance CPR.
Oh, yeah.
Like I think before we got kind of distracted by like all the different med options and all the different technologies and POCUS. I'm all about the POCUS. Like, let's do it. But we're not pausing compressions for POCUS.
No,
You know what I'm saying?
no.
Like high performance CPR and data metrics that guide our CPR. There's technology that helps us know we're doing good or bad compressions. Like all of that has been a shift. And I think we have seen improved patient outcomes because of it. And this is very anecdotal, but CPRIC, CPR-induced consciousness.
Oh, yeah.
I never saw that at the beginning of my career, ever.
Yep.
But lately, I am seeing it more and more. Patients are waking up as we're doing compressions to them. I think it's because, and this is anecdotal, I don't have research to prove this, but I think
I was going to ask you. I was like, hey, wait a second.
I mean, there is research on CPRIC, but
There is.
I have not done the research. But in my personal career, I have seen so many more patients wake up while we're giving compressions. I think we're just doing a better job of delivering high quality CPR and not getting distracted by all the other things that we could be doing, but really focusing on that as a team, like the doctor's no longer saying, please pause compression so I can get the airway in, or please pause compression so I can, use POCUS. Like we are focusing on keeping those hands on the chest. And I think that patients are perfusing their brains better and it's improving outcomes.
Well, and I think when you look back at the 2020 guidelines, the chapter on resuscitation education strategies was groundbreaking.
Yeah.
They threw a lot of stuff at us in that. And actually, it's one of the chapters which doesn't get as much attention, but it really was one of them which was really pushing the new concept. We need to think about what our degradation in training is really like. The 2-year card, the very fact that the AHA came out and said 2-year cards aren't good enough. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge business plan change, right? Let's be honest. That's a business plan change. And I think it's great that they took that responsibility and really pushed the concept that we need to start thinking about how we train people differently. We need to think about bolus training. Like one of the highlights of that was booster training. If we're going to do any type of group training for any type of group of clinicians of any type, we need to do booster training. And booster training, here's the cool part. Booster training can be anywhere from 1 month to 3 months, and it can be 6 minutes, it can be 14 minutes, it can be 30 minutes. All of this improves performance and it gets us back to where we want to be. So when we think of platforms like the RQI platform is a great example, resuscitation quality improvement. I mean, the fact that you're doing quarterly training in the space that you work, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's getting you where you need to be. It's bringing you back to your previous ability. And at least in our shop, we actually saw improvement in performance for our patients. And I think we're seeing those outcomes come back to us. And I agree with you, especially about the return of consciousness in so many of these patients. But more than that, it's now we're starting to see neurologically intact survival start creeping up. And let's be honest, we're not going to see the change from, 13 to 40%. We're not going to see that change tomorrow.
Right.
But if I see 14, 15, 17%, that means I'm going in the right direction, and we are. And that's the powerful thing.
Oh, yes. It is the joy of my career to get to go talk to a patient that I performed CPR on days prior and be like, what the heck? We did such a good job. We saved their brain. They get to go home to their family.
Yep.
It still blows my mind that we are able to be a part of. I get chills thinking about it. We were going to be a part of that. That's so cool. Yeah. And you, on the front lines of the research and the guidelines, you are a part of that, but much bigger scale. Think of how many lives are saved because you guys are arguing at the table about what's best for these patients, that's amazing.
But I will say honestly, one last thought on that. Every year at Delaware County EMS, at my agency, we have our survivor evening where we have all of our survivors and all the new babies who are born come to our awards ceremony, and we have the families meet the patients and the dispatchers and all that kind of stuff. And my favorite statement last year was a patient came up and said, I don't remember you at all. And the medic looks at him and says, I'm so happy you don't, and I'm happy to meet you. and it's of course, because now this is the moment where I've actually met you. And that sent chills. There wasn't a dry eye in the house.
Oh, I can imagine.
That's the stuff that survivorship is all about, right? That's what we're living for. Sorry about that.
No, thank you for interjecting. I love that story. The idea that the resuscitationists get to meet the outcome of all of their sweat and training and I get to see the outcome of that. That's amazing. Okay, so we've kind of bounced around and talked about a bunch of different things, targeted temperature management and use of bicarb and stack shocks and all things. Can you just give us maybe a reference, a specific example of how research directly influenced the guideline change? Can you think of one off the top of your head?
So I think we have a couple, right?
Okay.
And I think, we've talked about one when we talked about therapeutic hyperthermia. We talked about defibrillation strategies when we went to stack shocks to where we are now with single shock and the advances in technology, right? So all of those things are really powerful. Probably for the pre-hospital providers out there, one of the things that we think about a lot, and this happens in hospital too, is how we choose airways. Right? The PART trial, which was done here in the United States, looking at the concept of endotracheal intubation versus supraglottic airways, opened the door that we do not need to do an endotracheal intubation on every single patient. Sometimes we can just put a supraglottic in. And it's things like that which have changed the paradigm. I'm sorry, the other one that has been the bane of my existence and at the same time some of the most exciting work we've done is epinephrine. The very fact that we had 2 randomized controlled trials. The first one in Australia stopped because of public outcry that hey, you're this is crazy. Why would you do this? And the second proving that we had to do it so we could understand what's really going on. I think looking back, as we look at all these examples, the power of evidence-based medicine, the power of us being able to argue about this and fight and really talk this through in a reasonable manner is really changing how we think about resuscitation medicine.
Yeah.
We need to think about how we develop guidelines, and we need to think about the practice we're doing and do it in a concerted manner with responsibility for our community. And that's what's changing outcomes. That's the whole focus.
Yeah. Another question, and this is something that I personally struggle with, how do we strike a balance between rapid implementation of something that we read versus rigorous validation of the literature? I'm thinking about some random things like heads up CPR and maybe hand position for compressions.
Yeah.
For example, I could go on and on all these things that I've heard, we should be trying this, we should be trying this. Right now, the big thing is dual sequential defibrillation.
Sure.
There's research to support it.
Yep.
But AHA didn't mention it too much in the 2020 guidelines. They kind of said sure, you could try it if you want, but it's not a validated thing. And so how do we strike this balance of I read this thing, it sounds exciting, I want to try it, versus let's hold off and see if this is going to be best in a broader, sample size?
I love that question because I think I struggle with this daily, right? So we have the power of changing protocols. All of us do, right?
Yeah.
We can choose what we want to do as a clinician. We can change what our protocols are in the EMS setting, in the hospital setting. And that's powerful, right? You could change the effect on thousands of patients' outcomes based on your decision.
That's heavy stuff right there.
Yeah, let me put this in context, right? So if I'm running a large agency and I have 200,000 people who I am serving, when I mean I'm doing runs on 200,000 people, the number of cardiac arrests are going to be tremendous, right? I'm going to have a couple thousand cardiac arrests. So in that sense, right, that means I'm affecting all of these people, right? I think one of the things that we have to be very aware of is that certain strategies that we've identified and how we practice using evidence-based medicine and using guideline processes or whatever you want to call them, we've identified what works, what really saves lives. The question is the implementation of another strategy going to save more lives, or are there implementation hurdles along the way? Classic example is mechanical CPR. We all use it, right? I use it at my agency. But when they did the randomized controlled trials, in the best setting, they trained every single person, made sure everyone could do it exactly right. Even then, there were situations where mechanical CPR demonstrated worse favorable neurological outcomes. I mean, and this is why it's not the gold standard. This is why chest compressions by our hands and the work that we do as humans does something different. And it may be because as the chest becomes more elastic, maybe we adjust automatically and make sure we do a better job. I'm not sure. We don't know. But that's a great example. Now, going to places like Heads Up CPR and double sequential, I think these are great studies, especially the work that Sheldon Cheskis has done about double sequential is amazing. It is really opening our eyes that this could be a next step, right?
Yeah.
But just like any other study, if I look at the abstract of a paper and I just read the abstract, it's going to say, hey, this is the finding, right? I think what we have to do is we have to be more rigorous than that. We got to look behind the scenes. Keep in mind, DSD, the study itself, had to be stopped, right? Because of COVID and because of engagement. We were not able to tell the difference. And it was originally set to tell the difference between vector change and DSD. And we don't know what the effect was. Is it DSD or is it vector change alone, which makes the difference? Now, there's 3 other randomized controlled trials being done now to try to differentiate this out. And once we have that answer, then we can tell everybody, yes, this is the way to go. And till we have the answer, it's hard to know what's giving us benefit, right? And I think things like Heads Up CPR is very similar in that sense. But I think we have to have a sense of caution. The sense of caution we have to have is you and I, each of us, has a responsibility for a community. I am responsible for 1 million people, right? I'm responsible for what's happening to them, their families, and what those outcomes are. And that responsibility means that if I'm going to evaluate something, I need everyone to know about it. They need to understand that we're doing these trials and we're doing these things. So every person knows and has the chance to say, don't. Right? And so that's a huge responsibility for me because I need to now make a decision that whether or not this implementation strategy is what I need to do, which will save outcomes or not. And I think what's one of the things that with all these trials, when we do it in a clinical environment, it becomes one of those big things that we can change the dynamics and the outcomes of patients across the board, but let's prove it. Let's make sure we prove it because then every life is worthwhile. Right? Yeah. And that's so important.
That's good. So just to go back a little bit, we know that frequent training improves our performance and thus patient outcomes. You talked about that at your hospital, how you implemented that and you saw improved patient outcomes. But are there any other aspects to being a great resuscitationist that you feel like need to be highlighted today?
You know what? One of the things that you and I have talked about this, and a lot of us talked about it, is that when we're talking about being resuscitationists, it's not just being able to do the work itself. It's how do we bounce back? How do we take care of us at the same time? Like I can be a great resuscitationist, but that one case can bury me, right?
Yeah,
but I got to be able to stand up. And this is something I really believe in. I think it's so critical that we really talk about how do we figure this all out? How do we try to build ourselves into stronger resuscitationists? And in fact, this is exactly what my podcast is all about. My podcast is In the Heart of Care. And in the podcast, what we're talking about is what it truly means to lead in healthcare. How do we build strong, connected teams? How do we foster resilience? How do we stay prepared for these moments that matter the most? So that these critical moments where we save lives. And the way we do it is we have genuine stories from first responders, from experts, and getting their thoughts about what it is. And fundamentally, how do we build grit, right? The grit that we talk about that makes us into the resuscitationists we want to be to change the outcomes in the world. And I think when all is said and done, and I know you've made this a huge movement for yourself, is how do we help all of our partners? How do we strengthen each other and lift each other up? Because the moment that we're taking care of that one patient, we better be at our best. We got to be at our best because this is a tough time. It's a tough time for them and it's a tough time for us.
I can just say amen to all those things you were stating. These are the things that they don't teach you in your every 2-year ACLS recertification class, right? No one's talking about resiliency and the softer skills resuscitation and how to care for yourself and how to show up for your team. Like it's just clinical guidelines, get ingrained in your head and do it. Yep. But we can't do it well if we are hurting and suffering and burn out and not working together as a team. And so all those things are just as important, which is why our podcast exists.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you wish that every nurse or pre-hospital provider understood about the why behind the guidelines?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I think the biggest thing for me when we think about the guidelines is not just a bunch of people. These people have committed their lives to trying to figure out the best way to improve outcomes. And it's not one person.
Right.
It's all of ILCOR. It's international. It is an international consortium of people who've dedicated themselves to resuscitation in cities across the world. It is the AHA experts who have taken that data and really sat down, threw it on the table, argued. And why are they arguing? Because they're doing this in their communities. They're fighting for every life in their communities. And then they're bringing that to the table and sitting down together, arguing and fighting with each other to think about what's the best strategy that we can put out there to save one more life,
Right.
one more family member, one more kid, right? And that's the why behind the guidelines. And that's the why that drives us every single year to keep doing the research, to keep putting this together, and to put together these comprehensive updates, because this is a volunteer effort. The guidelines are all volunteers. People are not getting paid to do this work. I've volunteered for the AHA for 15, 20 years, and I'm not getting paid for the guidelines. And that volunteer effort and that work that is done by these volunteers is what's changing the paradigm of care.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this leads me very well to my next question. So then how can providers like you and me, we're caring for patients on the front lines, how do we stay current between the AHA guideline updates? Like, we obviously look to those for guidance, but like it's a 5-year time frame between 2020 and 2025. So any like guidance or wisdom for what we can be doing, in the meantime?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we have to have faith in and recognition in is that as guidelines change, as evidence comes in, there are always updates to the guidelines. And you will hear about those. These are like the focused updates, which we come out of the wall and we scream, hey, temperature control matters, right?
TTM1 versus TTM2.
Yes, huge arguments, right? But we got the answer. And then we're screaming the answer from the top of every mountain and saying, hey, this is what we need to do. And so definitely keep in touch and keep looking for those updates, because that's what's happening in between the guideline cycles. And that is going to open up the door for you to know that these are the next things, right? I think the other piece is, as guideline updates, it depends on how you're getting your information. But like, for instance, if you're with RQI, the immediate guideline updates come right through RQI. And I love that for my people. Because like for everyone who's trained at Ohio State University who is going through our RQI system, they're getting those updates immediately on the change. And this happened in 2020, is that once the 2020 guidelines came out, the RQI system changed, right? And so it allowed for that fluid information implementation that really changed the dynamics for how we look at this. And I think when it comes to you and I and the frontline people, we need to keep our fingers on that pulse and listen to those concepts. I think one of the challenges we do have in this social media age is we're always hearing people talk about the new cool thing. And as a podcaster, like, we always want to talk about the new cool thing, but at the same token, we need to put that in the concept of the larger data and what it all means. So listen to the new cool thing, understand the new cool thing, argue about it, and then come back to it and say, wait, is this saving more lives or is this one study, right? And I think that's going to be a hard thing. And it's always a hard thing because data takes time, movement takes time, validating the data and making sure that what I'm doing is saving grandma takes time, because it's the right thing to do.
Oh, amen and amen. This has been such an incredible conversation. I feel like we touched on so many things that I want answers to. I know my listeners do too. Like, Dr. Panchal, thank you for helping us see how far we've come in resuscitation science, like from the days of stock shocks and atropine to a refined, more like evidence-based approach that's saving lives and saving brains. This has been a really good conversation. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. If you're as inspired as I am by the role of continuous training, please make sure to check out In the Heart of Care, the RQI podcast, which is hosted by Dr. Panchal. It's full of powerful stories and practical tips from the front lines of resuscitation. Like, this is what you want to be listening to get those things that you're not learning in ACLS. So don't forget, evidence saves lives and preparation makes the difference. So thanks for listening today. Ash, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
This was so awesome. See you next time. Before you go, I have an exciting announcement. You can now earn CEs for listening to this podcast. That's right. Our Renegade has teamed up with podcast hosts like me who are delivering amazing content that not only educates, but inspires you to be the best for your patients. You get to learn and earn continuing education credits while absorbing knowledge from thought leaders and innovators in the field of health and medicine. You're already listening to podcasts during your commute, at the gym, or while unwinding after a long day. So why not earn your CEs at the same time? And that's where pod classes come in. Yep, it's just what it sounds like. It's CE learning through podcast. To learn more, I put a link in the show notes for you. Well, thanks for listening. I hope you learned something that will save a life. Remember, nursing is a team sport, so trust your intuition and don't give up advocating until you are confident you've done what's right by your patient. The views and opinions expressed on this show are that of Sarah Lorenzini's. That's me and mine alone. They are not intended as medical advice and should not take the place of your institution's policies or procedures. Evidence-based practice is ever-changing, and your patient care should reflect the current best practice. So if you want to get in contact with me, you can shoot me an email at sarah@rapidresponsern.com or on all social media platforms as the Rapid Response RN.